a time of enslavement, darkness, and violence. They risked their young lives. On their shoulders, they were carrying Poland.
Nazywam się Władysław Dąbrowski. Urodziłem się 6 października 1928.
My name is Władysław Dąbrowski, and I was born on October the 6th, 1924, in Warsaw. Still, I was raised in Novogrudok because my father got a job there as a former soldier of the Piłsudski's legions. Therefore, my father and mother moved. Also, I grew up there among Belarusians, Jews, and Tatars in particular. I must say that at the time, this community of ours was pretty interesting because it was not long after regaining independence. Our upbringing was completely different. These schools were different, and so was how we behaved. Our mothers and fathers, not only Poles, but especially, for example, the Tatars, who have been in these areas of Lithuania, Novogrudok, Troki, and other places for years, who even fought in 1410 in Yangiyoʻl's army against the Teutonic Knights. That was the upbringing passed on to us, especially by our mothers. This is what seems to have influenced us. The memory of captivity, of all that happened in the past, caused a very different approach towards us. The Tatars, Belarusians, who worked in the public offices, were so integrated that their conduct was normal and humane. This community cooperated very well. We were just young boys. After school, we, Poles, wanted to go to the synagogue. We went to mosques the same way. We went to weddings with our parents. It was a brotherhood. This affects the attitude of the entire nation and everything.
Na podstawę całego narodu i wszystkiego. Wojna się skończyła w zasadzie dla mnie 17 września.
The war ended for me on September the 17th, because when we learned that Russian troops were already entering, the military units, police and officials retreated to Vilnius, then across Lithuania, and finally arrived in Klaipėda. Even though Lithuanians dealt well with them, years later, because my father survived and he told us years later that they were convinced that in 2 or 3 months they would be back because the alliance between France and England had been signed, war was declared, the enemy would be swiftly defeated. And how did it actually play out? They didn't lift a finger at all. The French, in particular, while the English sent some corps, then fled from Dunkirk. And then, these exiled Poles defended England and helped the French. As the troops withdrew, the land was occupied by the Bolsheviks. They stormed in. It was terrible. Their equipment and tanks broke down time and again. And these soldiers even had rifles on strings instead of belts.
Ci żołnierze nawet mieli karabiny na sznurkach. Normalnie żyliśmy, jak to się mówi.
You may say we lived normal lives. My mother somehow managed there. There were some supplies. We survived that year somehow. The first deportation of Poles was in February, especially in the Polish eastern borderlands. Families of the Piłsudski's legion settlers and soldiers from this corps were deported to Murmansk or all the way to Siberia. And then they came for the families of those already there, soldiers, officers, policemen and officials who were thrown into camps and gulags. On April the 13th, 1940, we were deported as well. There was a knock on our door. We were prepared. We had already known. Mother was prepared. All Poles were prepared. Not only Poles, but numerous Tatars and many Jews too. Later I learned how many Jews were deported along with us.
Dowiedziałem, ile Żydów było wywiezionych. No i nas wywieziono z uwagi na to, że w Nowogródku nie było kolejnych.
Because there was no broad gauge railroad in Novogrudok, another lady, I remember her last name was Zawadzka, and we were taken out of our town by horse-drawn carts to a city called Nowojelnia, which had a connection with Warsaw, a broad gauge railroad. There were wagons already waiting. We were loaded onto them. The makeshift bunk beds were on one side, with a hole in the corner for feces. The women put together some sort of blanket as we rode, and so we sat on those bunk beds. We rode for 2 weeks and stopped just twice. In fact, we were hardly given any food, but boiling hot water was available. They called it kipyatok in Russian. My father was sent to northern Kazakhstan, beyond the Urals mountains, to the Aktyubinsk Oblast. We were quietly unloaded from the train at our destination. There were Soviet-made trucks without springs. We were loaded into 2 or 3 trucks headed to a kolkhoz. We didn't know where exactly, but the ride took almost all day. It was more than 100 kilometers to this kolkhoz named after Kirov.
Do kołchozu imienia Kirowa. Ludność nas wszystkich, jak tam nas przywiezie.
As they brought us there, I learned that these were the wealthy aristocrats' sons, daughters, and wives, not lower than princes. After a while, they discovered who we were and what we were like. In principle, they even responded favorably to us. There was some friendship. There was never any name-calling, unless you counted the NKVDists, who came every week to check how we, the Poles, behaved. We were not allowed to move more than 5 kilometers. Those were the rules. I helped with the tractor. I was sent to a tractor driver's course as an older Polish boy, already 16 years old. I couldn't wrap my head around being in exile, and I finished the course. As it turned out, later on, all the Poles finished these courses well, and I got a new tractor. They took them from warehouses across the Ural Mountains and transported them from Kharkiv, because that's where the manufacturing plant was. The driver's licenses came in handy when we were drafted, because we could get armored vehicles immediately. As surprising as it may sound, we got newspapers in this kolkhoz. Propaganda, newspapers. It was cheap. We got Pravda, the Russian paper, and I used to get it from time to time. Once I read that there is a dogovor, a Polish-Russian agreement, that all Poles are already legitimate citizens, that they are not convicts, and they are all free. The kolkhoz chairman came to us. You are free. You can move freely. Well, naturally, we heard that conscription is already underway. Anders gave the order to first gather as many of the people from gulags as possible. They were soldiers, police officers, and ordinary adult men. After that first recruitment, it turned out that at least 30% of this Anders army were Jews of Polish origin.
Żydzi byli, polskiego pochodzenia Żydzi. Po pewnym czasie przyszło te wezwanie do kołchozu. Ja i mój kolega dostaliśmy wezwanie.
After some time, a call came to the kolkhoz. My colleague and I received a summons that we were to appear on such and such a day in Novorossiysk district for a draft board. Mother prepared some food for me. This was on March the 13th, 1942. I was drafted with health category A. There was quite a large group of us, A's. We were given uniforms, but we were still just kids. Our unit was created to protect Anders as a special point. The English wanted to take over. Anders disagreed because we were very well trained.
Anders się nie zgodził, bo byliśmy bardzo dobrze przeszkoleni.
Young, free, idealistic. Thanks to them, we live in Poland, in a free Poland, out of gratitude for Poland. Subsidized by the Polish National Foundation.